Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Staci.
And I'm your co-host, Sarah.
And today we are talking about two Undercover films.
Ooh, Undercover.
I would completely fail at Undercover.
We should give each other code names. I don't know what they would be, because I just now thought of that.
Yeah.
Have any, in the hopper.
See, this is also why I fail. I'm not quick on my feet.
I know,
so
me either.
Okay, you're going to kill me now, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so our first film today is BLACKkKLANSMAN. This is the new Spike Lee film.
Yes, this keeps popping up. Every time I go on Facebook, it pops up. I don't know if it's because I actually watched the video once, and so now it's going to pop up forever. And then the other day it popped up, but it was not the trailer. It was one of those 30-second docs with the actual guy.
Oh,
Ron Stallworth is his name?
Ron Stallworth,
yeah. And he was talking about his actual experience, but it was only 30 seconds. I was wanting it to be longer.
Tease. Such a tease.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is... And I mean, I think most, if not all, Spike Lee films are definitely saying something, making a statement. Even back to, that's not even his first film, but back to Do the Right Thing was definitely, making a statement about race relations. This is also making a statement about our current race and political situations. Mm-hmm. As you said, this is based off of a real guy, a real situation that happened where a police officer for the Colorado Springs Police Department quote unquote went undercover with the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
And this is a black police officer. He was actually, at least in the film, but though this didn't come up as this was what they changed. Afterwards, I went and, did a fact versus fiction for the film versus the memoir. No one pointed out that he wasn't the first black police officer, and it's in the film that he is. So I think he must have been.
Okay.
He, and this is true in both cases, saw an ad in the newspaper for the Ku Klux Klan, which was recruiting numbers or something, and listed a phone number, and just called, kind of.
And in the preview, he gets through. It looks like he just directly calls David Duke.
Right, and that's not what happens in the film. He does actually talk to a local chapter, not David Duke.
Right.
But yeah, he calls and just starts talking because it's on the phone and they can't see him. So he acts as if he's a white person who wants to join the KKK. And they, buy this. So they're like, hey, come on down. And it's like, okay, cool, I've got it in. Wait, I'm not white.
What's crazy is that when I saw that 30-second doc the other day, Topher Grace...
Yes.
And David Duke, holy buckets. I thought, whoa, did they switch back to the movie? But no, it was actual footage of David Duke. I don't know if Topher Grace should be proud of that.
Right, yeah. So I didn't know this till after, when I did the whole fact fiction check. They were going through and saying, what's the difference? And they had some pictures of the real people versus the people playing them. So there's Stokely Carmichael, who changed his name to Kwame Ture. They had a picture of the actor playing him versus the real him. And then below that, as they were continuing, they had one of Topher Grace and David Duke from that time in the 70s. And it took my brain about 10 seconds because I was like, why do you have two pictures of Topher Grace?
Yeah.
Dude, you just had the character actor. Could you not find, oh my gosh, that's David Duke.
Yeah. I mean, all they had to do was give him 70s hair and a mustache and wow.
He really does. It's quite, because when I first saw the trailers, I was like, Topher Grace as the Grand Wizard of the KKK?
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, isn't that the kid from, maybe he only does things in the 70s.
I was like, that seems like an odd casting choice. But no, actually, that is an amazing casting choice.
It was perfect.
Yes. Speaking of casting, there's also at the beginning of this Alec Baldwin, who plays, I'm not even sure because he's only in the beginning, but it's, and my coworkers at work were talking about this about Alec Baldwin and his comedic roles where he himself is not a comedian, but he kind of does things in a sort of dry wit, I'm serious, even though I seem ridiculous, but I'm serious about it sort of style. He's clearly, if not a KKK member, someone in support of their ideals, practicing a speech or recording a speech. It seems like he's recording it and looking into the camera and meaning to, but he keeps messing up this speech. And it's like, what am I supposed to be taking from the scene? And then you're never in this film again. So clearly the idea here is the KKK is a little ridiculous, but I don't know what that scene is for, but I'm just like, Alec Baldwin, what are you? Your career has taken an interesting turn in the past 15 years. I like it. But yeah, so this goes on. He first joins the police force, and it's really just a big honor. He's wanted to be a cop, and he is the first Black cop. So he's sort of like, I'm down for anything. And they want to make sure when they're interviewing him that, he's going to be able to handle this, because not everyone's going to be cool with having a Black cop, both like people in the community, but also other cops. And
especially
we do see that
in Colorado Springs, which isn't exactly, I don't picture 1970s Colorado Springs being the hugest of diverse populations.
Right. Yes. And that comes up later, because it's like, okay, I get you're, the only Black cop, so people aren't used to a Black cop. But when other cops come up and don't know you, wouldn't they know who the only Black cop is? Wouldn't that have at least been like a, hey, I hear there's a Black cop. Oh, we got to go check him out and see what he's like.
Right.
You wouldn't have snuck around, and because it comes off that Colorado Springs Police Department doesn't seem that big.
Right.
Because we'll talk about that later. So I'm just like, there's a moment later where he's like confronted by other police and they don't know who. And I'm like, really? The only Black cop? You don't know who the only Black cop is? Okay. But anyways.
Okay.
So anyways, he does get a sort of mixed range of reactions from other police officers.
Sure.
There is one, Landers, who's just terrible. There's a term that they use in this, when he's in the records room, the police officers will come in and ask for the record of a person, and they'll say, I need the record for a toad. Well, toad, I guess, is a euphemism for a Black person. It's not one I'd ever heard of before. So when they said it, I was like, is that just cop speak for a suspect in Colorado Springs? Is that like just anybody?
Is it an acronym? How did that come about?
Yeah, it evidently means Black people, and he has to deal with that because that officer says, thank you, Officer Toad, to him. But then when he gets to the undercover team, department, what have you, which he kind of really wants to do just because he really wants to get out of the records department, they actually seem pretty cool with him. They're not really too upset about, oh, we've got to work with, this Black person on our team. They're more upset about, A, this is a rookie, and B, he keeps being late. Like, thank you. And it's very interesting. The two people he mainly deals with are Flip Zimmerman, who's played by Adam Driver, who ends up being...
Ren.
Yes.
Every time I see the preview, I'm like, oh my God, it's Kylo Ren.
Well, see, and I'm having just, along with Alec Baldwin, where, man, your career went so interesting. Adam Driver in almost anything throws me off, because the first thing I saw him in was like, I think the first episode of Girls, which I didn't really like.
Oh,
and so it's just
I don't remember that. I saw that. I don't know who he was at that point. I don't think.
He was Lena Dunham's like really jerky boyfriend, at least in that first episode.
Okay.
I was like, I don't like you. So when then he came in Star Wars, I was like, am I okay? I'm not supposed to like you, but I'm kind of supposed to. What? And then you see him in this, and I'm like, I still don't know what to do.
I don't know what to make of you.
But he ends up being the quote unquote white Ron Stallworth when they need to send in an officer to actually meet these people in public. And then his sort of teammate partner is Jimmy, who was played by Steve Buscemi's brother, who I apologize to for not actually knowing his first name, but I spent the whole film looking at him going,
Steve Buscemi has a brother who's an actor?
No, going, I know you. You're so familiar to me, but you look slightly different, so I must have seen you in something when you were younger. And then looking it up after and going, it's not because you were younger, it's because you're Steve Buscemi's brother. That's why you look so familiar and yet not. Right. So I do apologize to Mr. Not Steve Buscemi.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Interesting.
I've never seen him in anything before, which is why he threw me off.
I'm looking him up now to see if he's been in other stuff.
But they're both really pretty cool with him as they're doing this undercover thing. Even though, again, he's A, Black, and B, a rookie, but leading this investigation. There's a scene where he's trying to train Adam Driver's Flip to talk like him, because when the white Ron in person meets the KKK members, he needs to sound like the Ron on the phone, but he obviously in real life doesn't. So they go through, and he gives both Jimmy and Flip a copy of this. They go through speaking the I'm Black and I'm Proud song. And they're just totally down with it. And it's just like, I love you guys. Just because it's not like, oh, this is a black person and that's all sorts of problems, but just, oh, the rookie's late again. I was just like, I love you guys. This is so great. And it's nice to see, you know, that it wasn't, and we don't actually deal too much with, you know, any problems he might have had being the first black person in the police force, because it's so much about the let's infiltrate the KKK story.
Right. Not exactly what the story is.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So Spike Lee's films are always a little A, saying something, but then B, a little strange at times. This definitely has that.
Not tongue in cheek, but they're not funny. I don't quite know what I'm looking at. Like, and they're not sarcastic, but they're just on that edge of, should I laugh at that?
And he doesn't mind shooting in a way that's not jarring, but not in a typical filmmaker sort of way. That sort of like brings you out of like, oh, that's not what most films do. And it doesn't take me out, but I'm not used to that. Spike Lee definitely has his own style. But in this, as they're going along, you do get this back and forth of, okay, the real Ron talking on the phone and the fake Ron meeting in person. But even though, hey, we see this is clearly a white person, we're still very suspicious. So as you see in the trailer, there is one main guy who's constantly suspicious of him and then like holds a gun to his head to force him to take a Jew lie detector test.
Oh, geez.
Which I'm not sure how that would ever vary from a regular lie detector test, unless the questions are just specifically something that would affect Jews.
Is Adam Driver's character Jewish?
He is.
Okay.
He is, but he's not an observant Jew.
He's not a practicing Jew, sure.
Yes. So he is Jewish, and there is a scene where during this Jew lie detector test, because...
Sorry, just that phrase, it's horrible.
I was just like, but he specifically called, you're taking this Jew lie detector. I'm just like, but what is that? Can you just say lie detector test to see if you're Jewish? Like, what is it? Anyways, because Adam Driver is sort of like, you know, I kind of don't want to take this because he's not sure, you know, if his heart rate will go up or something on specific questions, even though he's a non-observant Jew. The guy's like, okay, I want to see your penis because, you know,
oh my
Jews...
God. But that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. So, but that's really amazing because it shows that both Ron and Flip actually would be much better than me at Undercover because they both think on their feet really quickly.
Right.
Because Ron does something to get Flip out of that situation, but then puts him in a dangerous situation. And so Flip then has to react really quickly to get Ron out of that dangerous situation. And I'm just like, you guys are way calmer than I'd be because I'd be so screwed you would have caught me like in 5 minutes.
Well, and that's why you're doing podcasts and not undercover work.
Thankfully.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so there is also a love interest in this. The head of the Black Student Union or something, her name is Patrice. She's actually not real. It seems. Okay. This was not in the memoir at all. But this was something we threw in for the movies because we always have to have a love interest or something. But I'm like, but it was a black guy who infiltrated the KKK. Isn't that story good enough?
Seems dramatic enough to me, yeah.
Do you need the love? But anyways, we do need the love interest because she's the head of the Black Student Union. She's the one in charge of bringing Kwame Ture to speak in the town, which is where Ron first goes undercover to make sure that, you know, like the town blacks aren't being stirred up and agitated by this I want to say rebel rouser, but that probably would not be the term. That when he's being told, hey, this is your first undercover assignment, it's explained that the police force or government or something considered at that time the Black Panther Party to be the like most insidious interior threat in the country.
Yes.
To which I'm like, okay, but the Black Panther Party? Really?
Yeah, I mean,
I get like they were, you know, militant, but the whole country, there's not a greater interior threat than the Black Panther Party?
No, they had FBI following them.
Did.
It was pretty amazing at the time.
Yes. But because she's very political and outspoken, she becomes a target. And so Ron starts having to deal with, oh, I'm undercover and I'm thinking the KKK might do something to hurt her, but I can't really tell her because she doesn't like cops because Black people didn't really like cops. Including at the Kwame Ture speech that he goes to, there is a lot of talking about, you know, cops killing unarmed Black people, which again, Spike Lee definitely making a statement and comparing it to modern times. I was like, I got that. You did not make that too subtle. I totally got that reference. Thank you. So he feels sort of torn, and there's a conversation they have, a very interesting conversation involving blaxploitation films and, you know, Shaft versus Superfly. And I don't think I've ever seen any blaxploitation film, so I've got no like horse in that race. But then it turns into talking about W.E.B. Du Bois's double consciousness thing, and he talks about how he always feels like two people, both because, you know, he's black and American and that whole thing, but also, hey, I'm a cop, but I'm not telling you, person who totally hates cops. Right. And I'm pretending to be a white racist, even though I'm black. It's just like, man, your whole life is just...
He's got to be so confused on his identity at that point.
Yes. And this film is, I believe, rated R and earns that. There is a lot of N-word chopping by characters of all races. Sure. Or really both races, because I don't think you see anyone who's not either black or white in this film. There is some shooting, though not really a lot of killing until near the end. Some people do die, but I won't say who. It is very interesting. And again, Spike Lee most definitely made this film to make a statement. It wasn't just like well, let me rephrase that. I'm assuming it wasn't just, oh, I feel it's about time to make another film. What can I do? But rather that he specifically chose this film. It was released on the anniversary of the Charlottesville protest, where the person drove the car into the crowd of anti-protesters and killed someone. And in Charlottesville, the Alamo Drafthouse actually put up a sign warning people who were going to see the film, because at the end there is footage from that protest. Okay. So
it's good they put up a trigger warning.
Yes. And they made it clear that, you know, this was the theater doing it, not the company putting out the film. But there's a lot of sort of clearly making comparisons both between then and now, with the, you know, comment about police shooting unarmed black people. Right. There was a comment about David Duke, and how at this time David Duke had changed his title from Grand Wizard to National President or something to seem more like politically acceptable. And Ron has a conversation with one of his superiors about, you know, okay, this is politics and maybe he wants to run for president someday, but you would never get a president with beliefs like David Duke in the office. And again, like the police comment, I was like, that is not too subtle. I totally got that reference because David Duke did come out in support of our current president. It's just like, yeah, so is anyone leaving this film not getting what your position is on things? Because if so, I'm not sure they're old enough to be in this film. Because if you are old enough to not like need a guardian to go with you into this film, you will definitely see what Spike Lee's trying to say. Right. But I thought this was a really good film. Definitely making a statement over things both at the time and current. I thought the performances were really good once I got past that's Adam Driver.
What's Kylo Ren doing here?
Who's also the guy from Girl. But he's actually really good. And again, partly because his character is not like, oh, this black person I have to work with. But like there's the scene, which I love in the trailer, where Ron first gets on the phone and he's like, what can I do you for? It's like, well, since you asked. I hate black people. I also hate Jews. And it goes off, and you see Adam Driver just sort of slowly turn.
That's in the trailer. It's very well done.
It is so fantastic. He does really well in this film. I quite liked him. I also quite like non-Steve Buscemi, who's
Michael. His first name is Michael.
Michael, thank you, Michael Buscemi. There is an actor named Michael Buscemi.
And he's done a ton of stuff. I looked him up. He's been in a ton of stuff. I've just
never seen him somehow.
I've probably seen him. I mean, he's been in things I've seen. I just didn't. My brain didn't recognize that he looked. Hey, that guy looks like Steve Buscemi.
See, my brain only recognized it, even if I couldn't recognize who he was looking like. So it's just like, I've seen you. What are you from? The whole film. But he was great. Also, the performances are really well. When he makes a Spike Lee, makes a very clear comparison. There's a scene where, and this is actually true also, Ron Stallworth, the real Ron Stallworth, because I guess the Colorado Springs Police Department was so small, when David Duke came to Colorado Springs to do the induction for new KKK members, needed security because there had been threats against his life. So the police are in charge of that, but we don't have a lot of people. So let's send the only black officer who's also running an undercover mission in regards to this organization to be his security. Whoa. Really did happen. And I'm just like, there's a number of things I feel are wrong with that, irregardless of there's no other police officer. What name is he supposed to give if anyone ever asks him? Because it can't be Ron Stallworth.
Right, because he used that name on his,
B, You send the only black officer to do security for the person who's very clearly come out as not liking black people in a very strong manner. And C, will be surrounded by people who feel just as strongly, if not even more strongly. And there is a plot in this film to kill somebody. The target kind of keeps changing, but there is a plot by the KKK, which is why we're doing this undercover mission to do something involving guns or bombs or something. And we have to figure out what it is before they do it. But I'm just like, I don't know, that whole thing of him being the security really did happen, but I'm still super questioning that. But while he's doing that, he's seeing the induction ceremony for the KKK. His love interest, Patrice, has invited a witness, survivor, or whatever of a lynching to come and tell other black students this story. And so you keep getting this flashing back and forth between, you know, the very new proud KKK members, and they eventually watch Birth of a Nation and like cheer at it, versus this very heartrending but also true story of a man who was dragged from court, strung up, burned, and castrated, though not necessarily in that order. And this was considered a grand spectacle. 10,000 people showed up and pictures were taken and made into postcards. And you keep flashing back and forth between those two scenes, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
So definitely not a film to see if you're all a little
squeamish.
Not even squeamish. There's nothing really gross in it, but just if like uncomfortable things make you uncomfortable, if you're to that level of like, you know, things that conversations that might upset people, let's not at all think about, don't see this film. But otherwise, I think this is a great film, very timely, clearly made to make a statement right now, was timed to come out on the anniversary of Charlottesville, and that was not just a fluke. That was on purpose for a reason. I won't say it's Spike Lee's best film just because I've only seen like 2 Spike Lee films, so I can make no judgment on that whatsoever. It was his first film, I think, to be nominated for the Palme d'Or since Do the Right Things or She's Gotta Have It, one of for a while, and people thought it might actually win, and then it did not. I would not at all be surprised to see this nominated for Best Picture in all the award seasons come this winter.
Cool.
Really good film.
Excellent.
So we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blanks and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Movie Podcast. Our second undercover film, on a slightly different style, but also a total style all of its own, is Point Break, which I somehow had never seen, and Point Break's not...
The 90s Point Break?
The 90s Point Break.
Notice I haven't read the notes.
I actually completely forgot that there was a remake of this film, just because the 90s one is so...
Right.
I won't even say classic, just so referenced at times. So I knew vaguely what Point Break was, even if I didn't know the full story of it. And I kind of was half interested to see it because in, I guess, the first Avengers film, Tony Stark calls Thor Point Break. And I was like, okay, I get the reference. I've like seen the picture. So Patrick Swayze has the long hair. Got it. Something about surfers and crime. Something. Got
Presidential masks. Yeah.
See, I didn't even know about the presidential masks.
Yeah. See, now I'm just, my brain has gone to this point where we have Adam Driver in one movie and Keanu Reeves in another, and they kind of have a similar look, and my brain just sort of imploded.
Well, and there's actually a number of those two similarities between the two films, because in both of them, even though one is based off a true story and the other is, I have no idea what the script is, because some of the things they say are so, but I'm going to assume not real. They both use their real names when they're undercover. And I'm just like, what are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing? And also, I don't care.
At least one's in the 70s, one's in the 90s. There's no Google.
Okay, but see, that's the problem. And we'll get into that in Point Break. I have a hard time. And again, maybe it's because I, was born in the 90s. So all my thoughts of, hey, how do you do this? You can fact check people are much more technologically advanced. I'm like, really? No one could have, back checked that story to see that you were lying just from the basics of, public records? There are public records then, weren't there?
Well, yes.
Couldn't you go down to the...
They were surfers. They were laid back. They didn't fact check.
Yeah. So, Point Break, this is actually directed by Catherine Bigelow, which shocks the heck out of me. Because if you don't know, Catherine Bigelow is the director who... I cannot remember now if she won or if she was just the first woman to be nominated for Best Director for Hurt Locker.
Right. Well, you got to start somewhere.
Okay. It's just sort of like, I don't know what to make of this. You go on to do Hurt Locker, but this film is not anywhere near Hurt Locker level. So anyways, it does star Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze. Keanu Reeves plays an undercover FBI agent named Johnny Utah, which right away, never mind that you give that as any name, that's your real name is Johnny Utah. I'm just like, scriptwriter, what were you doing? There's a lot of questions I have for the scriptwriter in this.
It's been so many years since I saw this movie, so now I'm looking up the cast, and oh wow, I've forgotten how many people. I've forgotten who was in it.
This is clearly aimed at he is, and it's super strange to me. I spent also the whole movie looking at Gary Busey going, why do I know you? And it turns out it's from the first Die Hard, where you also play a slightly crazy person, but in a different way. And I was just like, oh, okay. But yeah, there's a line in this, and I apologize for the language I'm quoting here, where Keanu Reeves first shows up to the Out West FBI office, and the director there is not impressed with him, and he says, you're just something, young, dumb, and full of cum. And I'm just like, oh, jeez. I can see why 20-something guys who totally would want to surf would think this was a totally awesome movie, but seriously? Wow, okay. Yeah. So anyways, in this, Keanu, he's not there for any specific thing. He's just been sort of, this is his new department, district, whatever. But he and ends up with Gary Busey as his sort of lead partner. Mm-hmm. And they're dealing with bank robberies, including this string of bank robberies that has happened by the ex-presidents, as you said, which is 4 bank robbers who wear president masks of ex-presidents to rob banks. There's a Richard Nixon and a...
So many comments on that.
Well, and I love in the first scene where we see the bank robbery, Richard Nixon especially is clearly having fun with it. I think he at one point does put his hands up in the 2 peace signs and be like, I am not a crook.
Yeah, he does.
As you're robbing the... Okay, yeah. But I mean, if you're going to put on, a ridiculous mask like that, sure, have fun with it. But the reason that Gary Busey has this theory that the bank robbers are surfers, even though they have no major evidence to support that, because one of the bank robbers, when they're about to leave, pulls down his pants and moons the bank. And this gets caught on camera, and Gary Busey can see that he's got a tan line. And there's also something about sex wax. And so these things that kind of would only point to surfers, sure, just go with it.
Sure, right, yep. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So he convinces Keanu Reeves to sort of go undercover to get in with the surfers to try and figure out which surfers it is that are doing these robberies. In order to do this, because he cannot surf at all, he ends up convincing Lori Petty's character, Tyler Ann, who usually just goes by Tyler, so I guess Ann might actually be her middle name and not one of those 2-name names, convinces her to teach him to surf by using a fake story about his parents dying in a car crash because her parents had actually died in a plane crash. And so he uses that to sort of get her sympathy and convince her to help him she ends up introducing him to other surfers, including Bodhi, which is Patrick Swayze's character, who has a lot of like philosophical thoughts about surfing equal to riding the wave of life or so. I have no idea. It's one of the, again, I can see why like 20 somethings in the 90s who really like surfing would have been like, oh man, this is awesome. But watching it now, I'm just like, really? Okay. Moving on from the ridiculousness of lots of the things happening here.
I've just gone back. I've just gone down a wormhole, a rabbit hole, a whatever, back to the 90s. And yeah, my life is, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And the script is not helpful. The acting's also somewhat not great, including, and I guess the film is somewhat famous for some of its really bad scenes, including, and this just totally made me think of like John Wick's whole "I'm thinking I'm back" line that Keanu Reeves did, where it's just like, I know that's supposed to be cool, but I can't. Keanu in this has a line where he's like, I'm an FBI agent, but the way he says it, it's like, I am an FBI agent. It's like, I'm like, so
yeah,
was this must have been like an early film for Bigelow, and she didn't quite know how to tell you not to do that. It's just been used for a lot of memes in the same way that John Wick line is, and I'm just like, Keanu Reeves, I like you in some films, but man, also some of those other films with your acting. Okay. But yeah, so it doesn't have great lines, but also the story is kind of all levels of ridiculous. It was clearly, hey, it's the 90s and the young people are all into extremeness or something. So we get surfing, we get skydiving, these are clearly supposed to be really cool people. Mm-hmm. There's actually a cameo in this, I think.
They're adrenaline junkies.
Yes. There's a cameo in this, evidently by the Red Hot Chili Peppers at one point. And all the people have very strange names of like Bunker and War Child and Bodhi, and I'm just like, so A, none of you super cool surfer people are all going to question Johnny Utah, but then B, you do actually, because Johnny Utah is evidently a famous quarterback who like blew out his knee, and the surfers all somehow know this, which again just even more makes me believe nobody fact checked his whole "my parents died" story. Like nobody at least knew to think, did they really? I don't remember that. Do surfers not go to the library and look at newspapers?
No.
What? I'm just like, how did you become this like hotshot FBI person and yet you give your real name? And okay. Yeah. So he eventually gets in with their crew. He at first doesn't think they're the ones doing the robberies, then finds out later they are. And it becomes this thing of, I like these people, but this is my job. And also Tyler's involved. And I didn't even realize this till afterwards when I was watching something else that was commenting on this. But this is, I'm not sure if it's the direct influence, but it's so much like it that I could see that it would be very much like the first Fast and Furious film, where Keanu is Paul Walker's character and Patrick Swayze is just blanked on his name. I want to say Dom, and that's not his actor's name. Crap.
I've never seen any of them. I mean, I know the
Vin
cast.
Diesel.
There you go.
Vin Diesel's character, where, he's the head of this really extreme thing, except we've taken it from surfing to street racing because we've got to upgrade for the 21st century, dang it. And there's the guy who's sent in to be undercover in this really cool extreme thing, and they do other extreme things because the one extreme sport is not enough, and then sort of falls in love with the woman who's somewhat tangentially connected to the guy and doesn't think he's the bad guy at first, and then is torn about. It's just like, yeah, no, I am definitely seeing the connections now that that's been pointed out to me. I'm not sure which film is worse, that one or this one. Neither one is a masterpiece, but in both cases, I can see why they would have been considered sort of like pop culture. I don't even know what to call them. Pop culture cool with a certain subset of the population.
Totally off the subject, but this was, according to IMDb, this was Catherine Bigelow's highest grossing film until Zero Dark 30 in 2012.
I'm heartbroken. I only know her for Zero Dark 30, which I haven't seen, and Hurt Locker, which I have. And so just from that and Hurt Locker, I'm super heartbroken over that fact, especially since you've got to consider inflation in the 90s, and I'm really sad about that. I'm actually super shocked about Patrick Swayze in this because he's, not quite the good guy. And I also only know him from like Dirty Dancing and Ghost. So I'm just like, but
occasionally played the not quite the good guy. I think in Roadhouse, maybe he was.
And there's a line in here that's clearly referencing something about like Patrick's Roadhouse,
which is a real place. I'm reading through the trivia right now, which it's a reference.
Okay, I get that I've never seen that, so I've got nothing. What did you only had like? I was about to say, you know, Patrick Swayze only did something in the 80s, but I think Ghost was actually in the 90s. So I'm like, what were you doing at this time, man? Like, what enticed you to do this film? Keanu, fine, maybe. I think he was a bit newer, even though he was past Bill and Ted by this point. Yes?
I believe so.
Maybe. I've never seen
I think so.
Any either.
Maybe Bill and not. Maybe, at least the first one. I don't know about the second one. I'd have to look at the timing.
I don't even know how many there are. I've never seen those of Keanu Reeves, so I've got no idea about them, and I confuse them with Wayne's World, which I also haven't seen. No idea. But yeah, it's just like I don't quite know why Patrick Swayze's in this. Also kind of Gary Busey. Also kind of Lori Petty, who is now making me think, man, she was in a lot of stuff in the 90s, and I cannot think of anything in the past 20 years that she was in.
She's currently in Orange is the New Black.
Well, I don't watch that.
Well,
I was watching this when she's got short hair in this too. I'm like, oh, and you with the short hair in the 90s, and Tank Girl, and Free Willy, and the No Crying in Baseball movie. You did a lot in the 90s. Where have you been? Like, I can't think of it. So there's a lot of like, why did people take this film, including Kathryn Bigelow? Unless, again, this was like one of her very first films, in which case you take what you can get, I guess. I don't know why this is considered like such a pop culture classic, unless it's one of those things that people view as so bad it's good, except it doesn't even feel that way. It's not like so ridiculously bad. It's just like, yeah, that's just, those parts were bad. Some of those parts were cool. The hopping out of a plane thing is actually kind of okay. I'm not sure why you're surfing at night, and even if you could, but whatever. It's like some of them I'm cool with, others I'm like, you're trying too hard to be like, quote unquote, cool. Please stop, screenwriter, especially screenwriter. I don't know what to make of it. I'm just like, yeah.
Well, do you want to know something that's probably going to make you even more upset?
Oh, sure. What?
So, according to the trivia on IMDb, let me make sure I find it. Dang it,
Sarah lost it.
Had it, and now I'm finding it. Hold on. But apparently, it's not in the credits. But James Cameron and Kathryn Bigelow actually finalized the screenplay together.
Kathryn Bigelow, what were you doing? Were you just like in an interesting period of your life in the 90s? Because this does most definitely not seem like the Kathryn Bigelow who later gives us Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, even though, again, I've never seen Zero Dark 30, but since it's off, similar, not totally radical bro surfer movies, and is more like Hurt Locker, we're dealing with serious issues. I'm just like, what? In the same way that Johnny Utah's character goes from Ohio to LA, it's kind of those worlds apart. It's just like, I get that, technically that's possible to be in the same country and or career span, but really? Huh. Well, we all sort of, we all grow and change with time, theoretically. And the ending for this film is just sort of really, like by the end, I was just like, wait, I have like 20 questions for the ending, which I think is supposed to like make me think both guys are cool and surfer life is cool or something, but I'm just sort of like questioning all of legality and wisdom, if there is such a thing as that in this world. I don't know. So I'm not sure why this is such a cool film. It was strange. I didn't hate it. I just didn't really particularly like almost anything except perhaps Lori Petty, who, again, where have you been? I don't watch Orange is the New Black, so you need to get in something I watch. That is my ending note. Lori Petty, get with it. How dare you?
Wow. On that note, huh?
On that note, we're going to end for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.